Hello and welcome to the NewSpace Vision podcast, sponsored by LiveView, where we discuss new space technology, finance, and innovation with executives, founders, and more exciting people from the startup and new space ecosystem. I'm Daniel Seide.
And I'm Sven Shivara. And today we have a very special guest here on the podcast. When I started to work in the space industry, that was roughly 10 years ago, I was working at a company which back then wanted to build hardware to send it into orbit and then ultimately to the moon in the context of the Google Lunar X Prize. The prize is no any longer. Most of the companies are also not existing, but the person which we're having today on the podcast is really taking the idea of in orbit and outer space exploration, especially here in Europe, on a whole nother level. And we are very excited to have Helene Huby today on our podcast, co-founder and CEO of the exploration company, which is developing a modular, reusable orbital vehicle. Welcome.
Helene, we thought about crashing the agenda today a bit and ask you basically the biggest question at the beginning. So, how do you imagine the future of the space industry in 2050? How will it be?
Tim, so first, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very honored to be part of this podcast. 2050, so this is roundabout in quite a long time, so 35 years, roundabout a bit more. And if we look 35 years back, and we see how much the space industry has changed, I think nobody could have, even imagine the changes that we went through. But okay, I'm happy to jump on the challenge. And to answer your question, I think we need to look at what are the big trends which are going to be transformative. One big trend I see is on the way we carry stuff, the way we travel in space. The new standards, and that's what we are applying the standards at the exploration companies, that the vehicles are going to be reusable. So this is true for rockets today. That's going to be true tomorrow for spaceships, so orbital vehicles. Second standard is that vehicle will be able to refuel themselves in orbit. And this is just normal if you think about transportation on Earth. Yeah. Every car, every ship, every airplane, etc. So I think we're going to see the same in space. Elon Musk is, let's say, paving the way with Starship. We are also following this trend. We are building currently a vehicle that ultimately can be refueled in orbit. And the third trend is that vehicle will be able to carry humans. Because something really new we see today is that we're not anymore going to Moon, Mars, to perform some scientific experiments and to explore. We have the incredible chance, like in the 16th century, people were living, discoveries of the new worlds to settle. I mean, from, of course, at that time, a European perspective. And we all have the chance to live, I think, now at a time when humanity is going to settle in space, step by step. And like in the 16th century, that's not going to be done in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. It's going to take decades. But if I look in 2050, I would imagine we have several bases at lunar surface. We have bases at Mars surface. We have stations orbiting Mars, stations orbiting Moon. I think the first step of sustainable bases will be stations around Moon first, this is currently being built. Mars, probably again stations, or like say spaceships that fly around and then fly back, because it's way simpler to build station than to land and build in situ a base, and we've already experienced of the station with the station around the Earth. So that's what basically I would see, a huge transformation in transportation, sustainable habitats around Moon, around Mars, the capacity to use space resources at lunar surface and or at Mars surface to refuel spacecraft, and humanity who, with pioneers, because it would be at this point in time pioneers, have started to settle within the solar system.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great to hear from you directly, who's really forming this development here in Europe. And I in my new office have a poster behind me, which is printed of the Integrated Space Plan, which is, I think, was created in the 1980s, in which it's a 100 years time plan and how humanity will conquer the space system. We are unfortunately not where we should have been on that plan in 2023, but I think over the last decade we definitely have seen an acceleration. So I hope we can catch up. But before we speak about the exploration company and what you're doing there, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself. What sparked your interest in space technology? Because at the very beginning, if I'm correct, you're not a space engineer by training, right? And your first career steps also haven't been directly in the space ecosystem. So, why are you now working in the space industry, and how has this come about?
Yeah, it came about like, if you think about your partner or the person with whom you share your life, suddenly you meet someone, you fall in love, and you just spend the rest of your life with that same person. So space is a bit like that for me. So I'm a mathematician and economist by training. I had the first part of my professional life in the startup environment, investing in startups, advising large companies about their digital innovation. And then I simply followed my husband. We landed in Bremen. I had to look for a new job. I knocked on the door of Airbus. They were kind enough to hire me, and I fell in love with space. So that's how it happened basically. And then it became clear for me that's going to be the rest of my life. It will be within the space industry, because I mean it's very rare, right? We are doing a kind of business where if one person fails in what he or she is doing, it can trigger a whole loss of mission. So basically, we can fail of something that took 5-10 years to be built and costed hundreds of millions or billions to be developed. And I think this gives a very, very specific mindset in our industry. We have people who are humble, who are team workers, who are passionate about what they're doing, who are able to sustain to work on program for several years. And I think I love the inspiration about space, the technological challenges, the fact that this is building the future of humanity, but also the mentality of the people who are in this industry.
Yeah. And maybe as a follow-up question, right? You said you moved to Bremen and you started working at Airbus. What I've found out in my research prior to this podcast is that you really had a stellar career within Airbus, which obviously is a huge company. You when I read that correctly, you've become head of innovation at Airbus Defence and Space within 5 months or so. How does this? How was that possible so quickly? Yeah.
Yeah, because I started as I was even not a manager when I started, and I started part time. I can tell you because I just had given birth to my fourth child. So first I started working full time and then part time. But basically, what happened is that Airbus Defence and Space was created, became created of the merge between Astrium and Cassidian, and the CTO at that time, Andrew Anderson, was willing to have a few flagship projects that would basically create this new culture of defense and space, and was also willing to have a new innovation process within the company. And I knew nothing about aerospace, but in my past career, my specialty was innovations, funding startup, developing innovative projects in cooperation between startups and large corporations. So I had, I would say, this expertise. And then I got lucky. My name was mentioned to work on a kind of small group that would define the innovation strategy for Airbus Defence and Space. And at the end of this few weeks work, then Andrew Anderson offered me the job of being the head of innovation of the new structure. And I knew nothing. So, sometimes you have sponsors in your life who believe in your potential. And this is what happened for me. And I'm super grateful to him. And that's also what I'm trying to do with my team when we hire people and when we see people who have potential, to trust them. And I think this develops qualities and capacities in people that sometimes they've even not thought that, they would be able to do such things. And that's what happened to me. And I'm now trying, to pass the ball and to make it also for other people around me.
And one of the last activities you had before you started your own stuff was basically being VP of the Orion spacecraft's ESM, which is a propulsion and maneuvering module, which was contracted by NASA actually to be part of Artemis. So super cool. What was that like for you?
It was awesome. Working on a vehicle that carries humans is something very, very, very special. It's a complete different way of taking decisions, of assessing risks. Working hands in hands also with NASA is something which is it's very cumbersome, it's very heavy, but it's also a great learning curve. And you work with people who have flown a lot of humans, also with people who had let's say the experience of loss of mission with humans on board. So it creates a very, very specific atmosphere. And you also meet astronauts who participate sometimes to the reviews so that they can understand better, let's say, the problems that we are facing, so that, they if something happens, then they can faster, I would say, understand what could be the root cause of these problems. So you feel a very, very special responsibility being part of such a mission. Yeah, I think that's my main takeaway, and you have the impression of you are a small person part of building something which is part of history, because in Europe this is the first time that we were building a vehicle that's going to fly human. We didn't have that experience before, so we are creating a special competency in Europe, and that's also the first time in history that we are on the critical path of an American very large campaign. Because normally Europe, you can see that with the space station, we are doubling what the Americans are doing. We are acting as a backup, but we are not on a critical path. If we do not deliver the service module to Orion cannot fly. Very simple, right? So that these two things, first time in history in Europe that we are contributing to flying humans, and first time in history that we are on a critical path of an American very, very important strategic mission, was something also very special, because you work for something which is historic, and it gives a very strong purpose of what you're doing.
Yeah, and also, so I think what's really interesting is you said this mindset which is created, right? And on this planet, on this entire planet, you don't have the chance to meet a person and talk to a person who is building spacecraft so often. So we want to dive a bit also more deeper into your personal story and the early days. But maybe before we do this, what does the exploration company do?
So the exploration company is building not 50% of a spacecraft that fly humans, but 100%. And of course, we start with cargo, because having worked on a human-rated vehicle, let's say we know how complex it is and how much time that's going to take. So basically, we're doing a capsule. That capsule can go to space stations around the Earth. We'll also be able to space stations around the Moon, and we'll be able to land at lunar surface. And that capsule meets the three requirements I was describing at the beginning of our interview. So it's reusable, it can be refueled in orbit, and longer down the road, we want to reuse the design that we probably, of course, adapt to carry humans. So that's what we're doing. So just to be very clear, we're not building a rocket. We are launcher agnostic, so we can be launched by, of course, European launchers, but also American launchers and Indian launchers and other launchers. Launcher just need to be heavy enough, because we weigh around about 10 tons, so it's not completely small. But then we fly to stations around the Earth, around the Moon, and we fly to a lunar surface.
Yeah, when I was still at university, I also thought that, hey, someone has to build these transportation vehicles. There was the ATV, right, for ISS and so on. And I was also thinking about what you could do there. And then I thought there are two type of companies. There are logistics companies. I'm thinking now about logistics on Earth, right?
Yep.
So there are the companies who are doing the logistics. And then there are companies like MAN who build the trucks for the logistics. So as the exploration company, are you more like the...
No, we do both.
Well, you do both, okay.
We do both. So you're correct that most of the companies on Earth, you can think indeed about Boeing, Airbus versus the airlines companies, or exactly like the car companies, and then the companies are us driving, or the logistic companies driving the trucks. But we develop, we manufacture, we integrate, we test, and we operate. So we do both. Reason for that is that it's still very difficult to operate a space vehicle. And we also think that there is a lot of synergies, because then when you operate, you gather lots of data. Plus, you are in direct contact with your final client, so you can really then take all this data and all the client feedback to step-by-step improve the design of the vehicle, so it meets furthermore the needs of the clients. And perhaps something I'd like to add on the design of the vehicle itself, because that's very specific. We are using, and it's only SpaceX doing that, apart from us. Again, we are very small compared to the big Starship, right? But one key requirement that we've applied is that we want to use more or less, let's say, the same architecture, the same tech brick, whatever the destination is. And this means a lot of economies of scales. This means also a desoptimization of the vehicle from a design point of view. But we believe that's the future. Like vehicles are going to be reusable, they can be refueled, and also like use like cars, right? Okay, you have if you take Volkswagen, or you have different types of cars, but at the end it's the same bricks because you industrialize the stuff. And we think exactly like that. And I can tell you, at the beginning, it was a huge design challenge because, of course, if you have like just coming back on Earth or docking with a station around the Earth, or like being able to support radiations to go to the moon, or being able to land, and etc., you don't need the same stuff. So you have to think in a modular approach where you have like the bricks, which are the core, which are the same, whatever the mission is, and then you shall be able to add landing legs or heat shields if the vehicles come back, etc., etc. So it actually it creates a lot of additional complexity, but afterwards, we believe it's going to create additional simplicity and economies of scales.
Yeah. And you already touched on like the goal, right? You said you want to send humans into space. I would have questions around, because obviously I think there are two camps in the world. Ones which say we need humans in orbit, at least for the next couple of decades, and there's the other ones where AI and computer robotics will advance so much we don't need that. But don't want to touch on this right now. But rather, I would like to understand, and the audience would like to understand. So, what are the next steps, technically as well as commercially, which you're taking to achieve that goal of building a spacecraft which can bring cargo and humans around the moon? What are the next technical steps? And maybe you could already shed some light on what are your commercial partners? How do you finance that? Who's paying for that?
Okay, so there are three questions in what you're asking: the human versus robots, the next steps, and the funding. So human versus robot, that's a debate I'm hearing. Sorry to be quite open, I'm hearing only in Germany.
Okay.
A little bit in France, but mostly in Germany. Because you go to India, like, we send humans. Right? You go to States,
US
hey,
it's the
you send
same, right?
humans. You go to China, we send humans. So I don't know what is happening in Europe, but we don't dare. I mean, this is so. I don't understand, honestly. And it's the reason why I'm saying I do not understand is like, hey, you have artificial intelligence coming in, or you have the discovery of the DNA and a complete new type of biomedicines popping up. So now this is the time of flying humans in space. So do we embrace it, yes or no? And of course, we can explain that flying humans into space is going to bring a lot of technological like boomerang effect on Earth with all the techno for recycling and living in space, etc., which has huge effects, of course, on sustainable technologies that we need on Earth. This is true. We can explain also, and this is true, that flying humans actually adds a lot of not only complexity, but you need to be able, of course, to maneuver with your vehicle in a very, very precise manner. And if you think about that and the docking with humans, etc., and you think about proximity operations, which have, of course, military stakes, right? If you want to be able to remove a debris or a threat in a very precise manner, you better know how to fly humans, because that's going to help you in the accuracy of flying your vehicle around and then removing the target. If you fly humans, you want to bring these humans back, right? So you want to be able to re-enter. And re-entering is a very, very strategic technology, because what re-enters are missiles. And if you think about having capsules around the Earth and the capacity to re-enter with these capsules when you want, where you want, at the speed of the re-entry, that's that's not at all our goal, but that's clearly something which has a lot of defense elements in it. So flying humans means developing technologies which are absolutely strategic, simply to protect our people on Earth and simply to also protect our space infrastructures. But more than that, I think this is just the trend. So I mean, not flying human is just not be part of the next step of space of space of the space industry. So okay, so I'm quoting that, but we are not any. We'll continue to do the robotic stuff, but now we need to move to a digital era, which is flying humans, basically. So the next steps are very simple. So we've built this expression company was created in July 21. What we've done in in a few months is basically to build our first re-entry demonstrator, because that's a key techno that we need to de-risk. So that's done. That's going to fly on Ariane 6. So hopefully in 23. Now we are full speed focused on the second demonstrator, which will also tackle re-entry. In this case, we'll perform a controlled re-entry. So we'll guide the vehicle when it re-enters. And we'll also test propulsion system, not at full scale, at let's say a smaller scale than what we're doing. We are the first in the world to use green propellant for that kind of vehicle, because of course green propellant is known and is used on small satellites, but has never been used in big vehicle like us. So that's a second techno risk that we want to tackle. And the small model and the mid-size model will also enable us to ensure the stability of the shape. And again, the working on the re-entry on the capsule. So basically, the one flight in 23 with a very, very small baby, right, which is called Bikini. One flight end of 24 with SpaceX with a big baby or teenage, which weighs 1.6 ton. Right. The diameter is 2.5 meter diameter. And here, technically, it's again focused on re-entry plus propulsion, plus, of course, GNC. And what's from a business perspective was very important. We fly in 24 with clients. So we have on board European Space Agency. We have on board French Space Agency. We have on board German Space Agency. We have also large space companies as clients. We also have luxury companies as clients. So we have around about 300 kilogram capacity for clients. And we are fully pre-booked today. So contracts are currently being signed. So that's very, very important because it brings a lot of credibility, and we have clients who give us payloads, which values is 1 to 2 million. So it's a huge, sign of trust in our capacity to bring that stuff back. And once we've done that, basically we did the baby, we did the teenage, then we go to the adult. And so we plan to have the full-scale vehicle in 26. And it will probably not be like the final one, because we want to, 26 is like tomorrow, so we need to be very, very fast. So our roadmap is that we start with a vehicle that flies around the Earth, and then we'll add the docking capacity to be able to dock with the stations. So we may change this roadmap to directly dock with stations, but basically that's a 3-step roadmap with a baby, teenage, and adult.
Nice.
So the adult will also be able to transport humans?
No.
That's
because
the next
that's the I don't know, that's the it's Gen 2, right? So Gen 1 is no, because flying humans is if you look around for benchmark, how much time do you need and like how much money you need? Typically it takes you 10 years, typically it takes you 2 to 3 billion. It took 10 years to SpaceX, right? It took way more to Boeing. It took 10 years roundabout to the Chinese. So the benchmark of a good space industry is 10 years to have a capsule flying humans. And I don't know the Chinese cost, but we know the amount of NASA contract given to SpaceX is around about 3 billion, and not all of that was used for Dragon. So, and if I go to a private investor, because again we are first in the world to be privately funded for this kind of vehicle, and I'm telling the private investor that he needs to give me 2 to 3 billion and wait for 10 years, and then he or she's going to have an amazing
you
vehicle.
Lost them.
That's not working. So we'll do human. We can do it, I would say, fast. If Europe decides, and first decision will be taken this year actually, that Europe's going to fly human. In that case, of course, we're going to accelerate our human-rated roadmap thanks to the support of the European Space Agency, and we are, of course, in very close discussion with them. And if Europe decide not to fly human, that would be really a shame in my opinion, not only because that's good for the Expression company, because I think that's very important for Europe, but then it will be more probably after a big event, could be IPO, could be like a big funding event so that we have enough funding to start flying humans.
And so Sven and I also have the perspective that you first should solve problems on Earth potentially to basically create the revenue stream to fund the human exploration. And I think your steps is also, hey, we support to build or transport goods in space, right? So this will be also more incremental. So it's high risk, but it's less risk than transporting human. And once you have the vehicles, you have your processes, you have the people, then you go the next step, and you can
Exactly.
basically
That's the
fund
logic.
it with the revenue streams, right? So that totally makes sense. But last question is: so you said 10 years and 2 billion. So like, how much more complex do you think, maybe from a cost perspective or in general, is it to transport humans versus cargo? Is it 10x, 100x more complex? 1000x.
So you have some additional technical complexity because you need, for example, to add an abort system. You need to add, of course, all the, let's say, living facilities, life support system. We're going to have, of course, some very, very simple life support system because within the cargo we transport some living stuff, right? Some plants, some houses, etc. But it's not toilets or that kind of life support system that you need for humans. So it's more complex. But what really costs a lot of time and money is the certification. And when you develop an airplane, like the time of development is 1/3, the time of certification is 2/3. That's a bit the same when you develop a capsule for flying humans. You need to perform a lot of tests. Sometimes, at least what I've seen on Orion, is that the test facilities are even designed for the vehicle themselves because you have very few vehicles in the world that carry humans. So it's a lot of testing, so it's, let's say, the 3 failure tolerance, for example, we're going to have it already on the vehicle that dock with the stations because that's a human safety requirement we need to have. So technically speaking, there are a few elements I've just described about system, for example, life support system, etc., that we need to add. But the big part is really the qualification to show that the vehicle is hyper safe.
Yeah.
Hyper safe. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. No, very exciting. You've mentioned a couple of customers, ESA, DLR, so the German Aerospace Agency, the French Aerospace Agency, and you're also based in I think Bordeaux and Munich. So
yes.
I see where that's coming from, and also multiple commercial customers. But I think as Daniel and I are in the aerospace ecosystem and the space ecosystem now since 10 years. And there always has been this discussion around the European Space Agency and governmental bodies becoming first customers, anchor customers of private and commercial space companies. You having landed the German, the French, and the European Space Agency as customers is something really, I think, impressive. Do you see, A, how have you done it? And B, do you see a development and a bigger willingness from these agencies to spend on commercial activities with new space companies?
So to answer the second part of your question, yes, I think most of the agencies now become really aware that supporting the space ecosystem in Europe, would it be NewSpace or like the incumbents or historic players, is more and more to go through service contracts and more to be an anchor client to companies. So this is perhaps not done because there is always some time between the awareness and the implementation. But I think the awareness is there. And if I look like 5 years ago, the awareness was not there. So we've made, I think, a lot of progress. But now it needs to be implemented, and not only with a very small contract, but also with very big contracts.
Yeah.
So how we've done that with the agencies, I think, we started with very small contracts, so that this is something which is, they said the effort to sign contract is not big. And also we've been very, very open with these agencies. So I have every 6 weeks, I have a checkpoint with CNES, every 6 weeks, so the French Space Agency, every 6 weeks, I have a checkpoint with the German Space Agency where I share more or less almost the same presentation I'm sharing with my board of directors. So I'm sharing my risk, I'm sharing my technical difficulties, I'm sharing my financial situation. And we also had a lot of technical exchanges with the agency. So we've been very, very transparent about where we are. And I think this has been critical to bring trust, because when you buy something, somehow you trust.
Yeah.
So if the agency sees that what you is developing looks kind of credible, then it makes the stuff easier. So it was easier because it was not a huge amount of money. It was very small money, and it was a lot of transparency. Now I'm moving into a phase where I'm going to ask for bigger contracts, so millions, and not hundreds of K or let's say, dozens of Ks, right? I'm going to ask for millions. So that's another size. And that's also another kind of credibility that we need to bring on the table. But I think the process will be the same.
Cool. Very nice. Very interesting. Exactly. So maybe before diving a little bit more on how you want to fund your space journey, you've said that there are other companies out there doing something similar, right? We at least see it from our outside perspective, right? You have the Dragon capsule, obviously. That's one established player, but then there are also companies which are moving into that space, similar to what you do, or at least maybe adjacent, like Vados Space Industries from the US, which is building a flyer. And I think there's also Tango Space, if I'm correct, and a couple of others. Who would you say is your competition, and how do you differentiate?
Yeah. So there are many companies building now small capsules, which are either doing innovative manufacturing or doing, let's say, bringing down stuff from the space station to the Earth. You can think about inversion, for example. Varda, indeed, which is very well funded, has excellent engineers coming from SpaceX for many of them. So yeah, there is more and more companies willing to build capsule. I think, at least from what I can read and see around, you still have very few companies willing to build a vehicle that flies to the stations. A big one, I mean. Most of the vehicles I see are small. Of course, they can become big, right? But if you start with small, it's a new vehicle that you have to develop again when you increase the size, because it's not like, hey, I'm going to increase the diameter. No, you have to redevelop a complete new vehicle, complete new propulsion system, etc., etc. So if you want to start big, you start big. If you start small, you start so it's difficult. Then it takes like 6-7 years to 5 to 6 years to become bigger, right? So especially with regard to propulsion system, you cannot scale it like that. So I see actually the main competitor for us, of course, is Dragon. This is very clear. But I see also SpaceX as a partner, of course, for the launch, but also partner on the midterm, because on the midterm, the goal of SpaceX, that is from what we can read, and is not Dragon, it's Starship. Starship is going to be huge. So for me, Starship is the container ship, and we want to be the truck. And that's also the reason why, for going to the moon, we've decided to use LOX methane as a propellant, so that potentially we can be refueled by Starship, right? So, so I think if we look short term in low Earth orbit, okay, Dragon is going to be our competitor. But when we start to be operational, so let's say 27, Dragon, for the time being, SpaceX is saying, hey, at the end of the decade, Dragon will be replaced by Starship. So we'll see how that works, because Starship is almost as big as a station. So, okay, we'll see how it works. But my intuition is that, especially around the moon, Starship is going to be the container ship, and we want to be like the last mile delivery that can be fully complementary with Starship. Around the Earth, I think the table is a bit more like difficult to understand, but whatever, if there is Starship around the Earth delivering to stations or being a station itself, there still be a need for smaller vehicle, very reliable, very affordable, going to stations. And last but not least, Europe has nothing, zero to go there. So, and with the private space stations, it means that Europe either, because today the way we fly our astronauts or we send cargo to station is we do a barter agreement with NASA. Because the space station is public, right? But tomorrow it's private space station. So it means if we don't have our own vehicle, literally we're going to pay 0.5 billion. And when we speak about the moon, 1 to 2 billion per year cash from Europe to the US. So I mean, I appreciate that this money is invested here.
Totally. That would have been my next question, but also this sovereignty may also play a role. So not only the financial aspect, but the financial aspect is basically a no-brainer, right? So are there not even other companies same stage as you with the exploration company in Europe specifically? No, not at all.
We are the most advanced in Europe.
Nice. So is there a magic source for you, or is it for you with all your past experiences? Hey, we just have to do it, guys. So
Yeah, it was more. We just have to do it. So when you work on Orion vehicle, right, which was my case when I was at Airbus, and you see that exploration is the next year, let's say the next place that's going to be disrupted in space, that's going to be profoundly transformed. And you see that Europe has the only thing Europe has today to participate to that is 50% of Orion. And I believe Orion is going to be outdated within the next years, not 3, but like by the end of the decade will be outdated because it is not reusable, cannot be refueled. So we'll have nothing to participate to the next step of humanity. So it was very clear for me that hey, we need to build something here, and yeah, that's how we started.
Nice. What a nice coincidence that you also had the team together basically for this journey, right? So you went out of Airbus. So that's a short story. So at some point in time, you figured out I want to leave, even if I have a cool job. I want to do this. And how did you then meet the other team members to realize this journey?
So we had some internal discussions. I shared my, let's say, my project with one person at the beginning, then a second one. That was it. And then, and then we did a few, like in the weekend, a few sketches, a few calculations. Then I spent the whole weekend completely in closed doors working on the business plan because I wanted to check that we are talking about something that can be profitable. And then I decided to leave. And I decided to leave without any certainty that the other people, there were 3 people at that time with whom I was discussing, would follow me. But sometimes you need to take a decision, describe the dynamics, and indeed, after, so I informed Airbus. It was in April, and then in July, 2 other people followed.
Nice, yeah. And what I felt from this conversation is you didn't even had any skepticism that this is the right decision, right? You just went out and did it. Is it like this?
It was of course, it's like giving birth. It was a process. It took me some time to think about that, but then when it's clear. You just
And then you had a kickstart basically. So you worked very soon together with investors, right? So and they also had nothing to do with space. For example, Cherry Ventures. So can you explain us a bit how you raised your funds and why and you're doing it with these investors? And yeah, how much money did you raise so far?
Yeah, so on raising the funds basically, so we have raised in November 21, so a few months after company creation, a seed of 6.8 million. And now we've just signed a Series A of 40.5 million.
Oh,
so
congrats.
the biggest Series A I think ever raised in Europe by a space company.
Wow.
In very difficult economic times. So I'm quite proud of what we've been able to achieve here. And I think the reason why people have trusted us at the first seed round is about to invest on people. And you are having a bold project with a team who had experience, which is quite rare actually, and who had experience exactly in the field of that project. So, and also the market is pretty clear. Okay, you're going to have an increased number of space stations. Europe has no vehicles. You have like an anchor customer, which is the European Space Agency, which is pretty clear. And basically the point is, okay, if the team delivers, they're going to be something which can be quite big actually. The second fundraising was completely different because we are in a very difficult economics. I mean, not we, but like the economic situation in 22 was very difficult for fundraising in general. And I think what happened is that basically since company creation, we've been on track. Planning, cash costs. And this in an environment when inflation was rising like crazy, lead times were exploding like crazy. So it means that we had enough margin, or we knew our job basically well enough so that we could, because of course we had these types of problems, and of course we had inflation problems. But like, despite that, we remained on track. And I think this was very impressive for the people with whom we spoke, because there was the fear to invest in deep tech, the fear to invest in space. But okay, the team was not only experienced, but had demonstrated in the first 1 year and a half that they were basically meeting their metrics. And we're in an environment where people were investing because of data and not because of story. And we are bringing basically the data. And we are also bringing data on the consumer side, that the first prototype was fully pre-booked. Even if all the contracts were not signed. That was a sign of trust. And they did also a lot of interviews within the space environment with agencies. And I'm super grateful to the space agency because they accepted to speak with potential investors. So they also helped us a lot. And basically the feedback around was quite positive. So yeah, I think it was really based on data and execution. And that's also going to be, of course, now my priorities for the next, next 1 to 2 years, because this is the only way to be able to raise again afterwards.
Yeah. Nice. And I have to say, in this podcast, the confidence of the situation and that we need this, you transported, makes me understanding that investors put so much money into this. So one thing we would be curious of is you also how you pitch to investors. I think you said there will be a lot of commercial driver that we need this, and I would like Sven and I are always interested. What will be the big thing in the space ecosystem? Will it be space manufacturing? Will it be mining? So what for you, from your perspective, will be the biggest driver?
No, the way I've pitched to investors actually is that there'll be a 400% growth of the infrastructures. So stations, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's just a fact. And I think there'll be also and Starship is going to accelerate that tremendously. And I believe there'll be not only infrastructures where people can live, but also infrastructures to store, for example, computers, and also military infrastructures to store some stuff that can basically defend and protect the space critical infrastructure. So all these infrastructures will have to be supplied. And to supply an infrastructure, there's a very specific kind of technology that you need to develop because you need to master docking, proximity operations, and then if you want to use the vehicle to make it very affordable, you need to master re-entry.
Yeah.
And so that's basically what I sold. And then what I also sold is the way we presented is that we are not a company which is doing like you invest a lot of millions and then something happens. But we've had this roadmap with baby steps and teenage steps and adult step. And I think this was a de-risking factor for the investors.
Yeah. And you basically make it independent of one specific trend. It's just that whatever will be the biggest trend, in general,
no, we've not made that independent. We've basically said that our core market was to resupply space stations around the Earth.
Okay.
Because that's the first step we're going to do. And we've presented our company as a logistic company. Because in-orbit manufacturing or etc., this may become big, but this may also become nothing. So I cannot bet, the future of the company of something which is so risky. So I'm betting on something which has existed since decades. And worst case, we're going to fly once per year because that was the rate of flight of ATV, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, cool. Very nice to hear. So the DHL of space. Very cool. So 2 final questions before we have to wrap up. Unfortunately, Danny and I had tons of more questions, but maybe for the next time. So one personal question. What's more stressful, being VP at Airbus or a startup CEO?
Yeah, startup CEO is of course more stressful, but of course it's a joy which is very, very profound and it's incommensurate. Because not only I think we unleash our talents, but I have the chance to have an amazing team, and I think we contribute to unleash the talents of others while working together, and this is a very profound joy.
Yeah. That's I couldn't agree more, and Danny and I feel the same way. But good to hear. So maybe in another life, then I can become also a VP at Airbus when I want to have a less stressful life. But exactly. The last thing we are always asking our guests is, who should we have next here on the podcast?
Yeah, so I would recommend Géraldine Najar. She's the director for commercial space and procurement and industry at European Space Agency. And she's at the core of the transformation of ESA. And I think it would be great to have her because she can explain what she's going to implement, but also you can challenge her to make sure that she implements really what is needed for the space tech industry in Europe. Excellent
guest. We would be happy if you could make an intro, and we would love to talk to her.
Yeah, I'll do so.
But first of all, thank you very much for taking the time. Thanks for the listeners to tune in again. And Helene, thank you very much, and thanks for the great work at the Exploration Company.
Thank you, Sven. Thank you, Daniel, for the invitation.
All right, liftoff, and the clock has started. Speed, Houston, the Eagle has landed.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.